right, hello everyone. I'm very excited because I finally got a chance to talk with Ian. Well, we talked a lot before, but because of COVID, we haven't got lots of chance to have conversations, especially about Chinese wine production. So welcome to this series, and today's topic is with Ian. We have a conversation with Ian about Chinese wine. Ian Dai is my friend, and he's making interesting wines and doing very interesting wine-related projects in China, in mainland China, right? So Ian, please give an introduction of yourself and the winemaking projects you have in China.
Thank you, Gus. Glad to be here. So I'm Ian. I started to make wine in 2017. So this is going to be the sixth vintage. And before that, I was wine buyer for Amazon for a while. And before that, I was doing wine education for a long time and sommelier for a while. So I was in wine about 12 years. So eventually I started to make wine in 2017. My winemaking project started with Ningxia. It started as a very small project. And at the beginning, it's not a full-time project. It's more like I was doing wine education at one hand, it's consultant at one hand, and I was making wine in the other hand because it takes a lot of capital to make wine. It's quite difficult to have yourself just jump into winemaking full-time. So I started to make wine in Ningxia at the beginning. And later on, I became quite interested in the wine region of Shangri-La. And I tried to make a very small batch in 2019. And I make a bigger batch in 2021. In 2021, I also make a little bit in Huailai, which is in the north of Beijing, on the same direction as Winter Olympic. So right now, I'm selling my wine mainly in China to distributor, and then they resell it to small restaurant and Western restaurant like bistro style wine bar or wine shop. That's my main channel. And also I assume about 25% of the sales is happening online. So people who drink this wine in the bistros, they become interested, they search this wine in Taobao and they buy it in Taobao.
Wow, that's lots of information and great introduction. I think a lot of people who will listen to this conversation will have tons of questions. So we will start with the viticulture part and the grape growing in China, shall we? So what are the key differences of viticulture in the major wine producing provinces? In your eyes, such as in Shandong, Hebei, Ningxia, Yunnan, Xinjiang. You mentioned that you have projects now in 3 provinces, right? In
Yes.
Huailai, Hebei province, in Ningxia province, and also in Yunnan province. What are the key differences among them? And why do you choose them? And if you can cover some of the key differences of viticulture in those provinces, that'll be great. And just for the audiences, we always say provinces because there's almost no regional concept in China. Okay, we don't have many. We probably only have one GI, one officially recognized region, which is the Helan Mountain East. That's about it, east mountain side of Helan, right? So anyway, please tell us the differences about among these provinces.
So first I make wine in 3 regions. 2 of them are a little bit similar. So Ningxia and Huailai are very similar in terms of viticulture conditions, because they all located in the northern part of China. So they all need to bury the vine in the winter time. So difference between Huailai and Ningxia is more located in the west part, so it's sunnier normally. So in terms of grape and wine, you have less acidity from Ningxia, and you have a lot more natural acidity from Huailai. The picking time is a little bit different. Ningxia, it's about 2 weeks earlier than Huailai. So in Ningxia, we start to pick around September. In Ningxia, we have very little white varieties, so we don't really separate the picking of white variety and red varieties. So the picking normally started at the beginning of September with earlier ripening varieties like Merlot. And in Huailai, it normally happens in the second week, even third week of September, and it extend to very late because in Huailai they have more variety difference. For varieties like Petit Manson, they pick super late. So you can see Ningxia and Huailai have similar conditions, but Huailai it's a little bit colder. It picks later. And Shangri-La is very different. It's located in the southern part of China. It's very low in latitude, but very high in altitude. So the part they think is more suitable for wine grapes. The vineyard was located in the altitude between 2,300 meters to 2,700 meters. So it's, I mean, in the world of wine, maybe only the northern part of Argentina, northern part of Chile have similar condition, low in latitude, high in altitude. It's in the southwest of China, so it's infected by the monsoon season. So it's kind of rainy season and dry season. So in the rainy season, which here it's July, August, and almost half of September, it's quite wet. So it's kind of difficult to, it's very challenging in terms of disease management. In Ningxia, Huailai is easy. They almost have no rain in August, in September, a little bit, but not too much. So it's easier in terms of manage the fungus disease. And Yunnan, it's a big challenge. And Ningxia, the area of vineyard is very big. It's basically a big piece of quite flat land. So local government is pushing to have more vineyards. There are a lot of investments to invest to grow more vineyards. So it's quite easy. It's actually happening right now. The industry is not quite big, but it become quite big right now. But in Shangri-La, they don't have land. They don't have agricultural land. They have a lot of mountains, but the agricultural land is very precious. Before they grow Tibetan barley on this land for thousands of years, and they need to convert it to vineyards. They don't have an empty land for vineyards. So right now, the total area of vineyard in Shangri-La is still small. The number of wineries is still small. The traffic is super difficult. I mean, the route for me, the way for me to go into Shangri-La, I need to drive 3 hours from the place I live. I live in Yunnan, so it's within the same province. I need to drive 3 hours from Dali to Shangri-La, another 3 hours from Shangri-La to Deqing, and almost another 2.5 hours to the vineyard, which up in the hill. So within a province, it's about 8 to 9 hours driving. So Yunnan, it's very exciting because it has this diversity for different varieties, but right now it's a very young wine region. And in the future, it will not be big as well because the land is just not that much for grape growing.
Thank you. Wow, that's also a lot of information, but I would like to clarify a bit of the information for the audiences. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ian. Okay, so we mainly talk about the 3 provinces where Ian has his wine projects in. Ian mentioned that in Ningxia province and in Hebei province, the situations are a bit similar in terms of the type of climate. But we need to clarify that Ian also mentioned the areas for grape growing in those 2 provinces, right? So just to clarify, in Hebei province, Ian mentioned Huailai, which is the center of production. So Huailai area in Hebei province. And also in Ningxia, we are mainly looking at the Helan mountain, especially the east side of the Helan mountain in Ningxia province, right? But now they are actually expanding the area in other parts of Ningxia because there are lots of governmental support for the Ningxia province in terms of viticulture and winemaking. And then we have Yunnan province, where we have Shangri-La, the beautiful Shangri-La. And Ian mentioned a lot about it. The Shangri-La area is not a vast area in terms of viticulture because they've only just started. And you have to find these kind of small piece of land with extremely high altitude to grow grapes. So super challenging. We're going to talk about how challenging it is probably later. But then I will also mention 2 provinces where Ian doesn't have his project on, but they are very important as well. One is the Shandong province, which some like corporate giants, right? Like the Great Wall, Changyu, they have their vineyards over there. It's semi-tropical monsoonal climate. So you are looking at even more rainfall. But in drier years, we could have good results, right? With less rainfall and longer growing season. And they don't need to bury vines over winter time in Shandong province. And then we have Xinjiang, which I think is quite unique in terms of there's plenty more sunshine even than Ningxia. They do need to bury vines with earth over winter time. But I think Xinjiang is quite interesting because they have a long history of table grapes and raisin sultana production. So I think all these provinces have their own characteristics, and there's no way we can cover them in detail in this conversation. So now I'd like to ask Ian another question, because you mentioned about the challenges of commuting in Yunnan province in Shangri-La region. What are the other key challenges of grape sourcing and grape growing in China? Because I don't find many people talk about how you get reliable grapes in China, but I think it's quite interesting. I want to know, and I want the audiences to know more about it.
I mean, not much people talk about it because you cannot. The first thing is the quality of a fruit, because it's a young country for grape growing. So we don't have growers who grow at different quality level. Normally, just people who grow for quantity rather than for quality. This is happening all around China. So even you want to pay a little bit more for better quality fruit, it's just not there. There's not people growing for different price segments. No people growing for a premium part, no people growing for mid price, no people for growing for entry price. Everybody just aiming for the same direction, which is quantity. But now situation changed a little bit, because especially in Ningxia, because in Ningxia there are a lot of investments in past 15 years, start from 2007, around that time. So they will be wineries who grow too much vineyard. They have exceed fruits they cannot use, so they start to selling that fruit. That fruits have better quality because it's a winery who grow their own grapes, which designed it for their wine, and it have much better control compared with other source. So I start to buy from wineries who have grape to sell to me from 2 years ago. And another thing is super complicated to explain, but I hope Gus you can help me a little bit, because in China, in the rural area, you don't own the farmers who don't own a big piece of land, because all the land within this village is divided into different block and divided to different small pieces. And these small pieces is given to individual farmer. So no farmer have a big piece of land. They only have a small part here for grape growing, have small part there for orchard, have small part in other places for corn growing. So we don't have professional grape growing farmers. We have farmers who grow everything. They cannot spend enough time in grape growing. And once they figure out grape growing is, it takes a lot of time to take care of the vineyard. It also needs a lot of attention, which they tend to overcrop, and they tend to use too much treatments to the grapes. So that's a second topic. It's impossible to find organic grapes. Even I want to find organic way growing grapes in China, but it's almost impossible to find it. Yeah, that's a reality.
This is what I want people to, well, the international wine industry, the global wine industry to know, is that it's a complete different philosophy of grape growing in China. Because in most places in the world, especially in old world countries, the grape growing is treated almost like an entire separate agricultural industry, and they are protected by lots of regulations, and they are supported by subsidies from their individual country, from EU, European Union, from whoever, those kind of governmental body with tax benefits and many things. But in China, we started from, the government only started to encourage these kind of wine grape growing, probably let's say 30 to 40 years ago. And it really didn't take off. The wine industry really didn't take off here until about like 15 to 20 years ago, or even like more recently. So you do not expect things saying, okay, we want quality organic crops for like the most super premium wines, and there are these kind of professional growers we can contract and give us the most beautiful grapes. They don't think in that way, because of the policy of the land in China, because what they have for farmers. The farmers will only have that piece of land, and they will grow whatever crops that are more valuable with larger quantities, so they can survive. And honestly, like for wine grapes, they don't make much money for those farmers, right? But as Ian said, in Ningxia nowadays, we have lots of support from the government, from different corporates or industries, and they can actually do these kind of very premium crops in a small scale for certain wineries, because they started to care about the quality of grapes, and they started to put resources into it. That is why I want to ask the next question, because people are exploring the interesting potential grape varieties now in China. And people are now talking about Marselan. But do you think, like, or should Marselan be the stellar grape variety of China, in your opinion?
There are a few things I want to talk about, because first, only the northern part of China need to bury the vine, which have very short growing seasons for each varieties. So if variety like Cabernet Sauvignon, which don't have enough the growing season is not long enough, the ripeness, the phenolic ripeness is not ideal. Also, the greenness character, the herbaceous character is very obvious. It's very stand out in this wine. Also, like Cabernet Sauvignon, it cannot retain good acidities in the climate like Ningxia. So normally they fix the acidity with tartric. So Masalan would solve almost all these problems for Ningxia. So it ripens earlier, it don't require a super long growing season, and it don't have this annoying herbaceous character. So for Ningxia Masalan, it's currently very popular, very good. People want to grow it. But right now, I think we don't have we don't know how to make Masalan. Let me put it in this way, because we all made it like Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's very heavy extraction, a little bit of new oak for premium wine, and that's it, nothing different. So I think we still need a little bit of time to figure out what variety we need to blend with Masalan. And should we make it more like a Pinot Noir or very light Syrah? So we pick it earlier, we include a little bit of stand, we do a little bit whole bunch fermentation with lower temperature. We can try that. Actually, it may end up with a better result. But right now, most of people is, almost everybody is just make it like another Cabernet Sauvignon. So which will end up with a lot of wine which tastes very, very similar. But not southern part of China, which including Shangri-La or Shandong that me and Gus talk about, they don't have this problem of burying the vine at winter time. So they have a bit longer growing season of 2 to 4 weeks. So they are, especially Shangri-La, it actually gets drier after October. So it gives Shangri-La opportunities to grow almost every varieties. So Shangri-La, yeah, they can try Masan, but they can also try all the classic varieties in Europe. Shandong, and the advantage of Masalan is it ripens earlier, and the skin is so thick, the berry is very small, so you avoid the risk of rainfall at the later part of the harvest. And it's good, but I think it's a good variety compared with what we have on the land right now. And I think we should do more experiment with this variety, especially on a supporting variety, just like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot, Cabernet Franc combination in Bordeaux. So you need other varieties to add layers to help build texture, to help build aging potential, also to just have more flavors in this wine. Right now in Cabernet Sauvignon, we don't have it. People do it in a very simple way, but it's not interesting. I don't think it's correct.
Okay, I'll leave this thoughts to the audiences, but I have to agree with almost everything you said about Marcelin, because people talk about it, but at the end of the day, it's a man-made crossing. And yes, how many man-made crossings can make most superb wines in the world? I cannot think of any. Maybe Pinotage is getting there, but it's not there yet. And so I like the idea that it should be a supporting role. And the main reason people started to plant it is because even with some shorter growing seasons in certain provinces, in certain regions in China, it will not produce offensive herbaceous flavors. Unlike when you're getting a poor year, right? In certain regions, the Cabernet Sauvignon can taste really bad, right? That's the reality. And so they started to experiment Marcelin. But what I found interesting is that the growers in China or some of the winemakers in China have more experience on Marcelin now. So now Bordeaux permit that. And Bordeaux people start to ask Chinese growers and winemakers about how to manipulate this variety. So we'll see how it goes, right? But in terms of winemaking, what you mentioned that people are still making certain varieties like Marcelin in the Cabernet way. Or maybe some people have this kind of impression that China put so much focus on Cabernet Sauvignon, these kind of varieties in the past. But in terms of winemaking, are we seeing exciting things? Well, I'm asking in front of you because you are doing the most exciting things in terms of winemaking, right? You are doing, how do I call it? It's not natural wine, but more of a natural wine approach to certain varieties and to certain styles. You're also experimenting with different varieties, using different techniques in different regions. Yeah. So what are the trends of winemaking in China, in your opinion?
First trend, let's start it like 5 years ago. People to start to try it is wild fermentation. Is because before that, wild fermentation is not a common thing. But start from 2017, 2018, there are a lot of small premium wineries start to try to wild ferment some of their batches, and later on they convert to use wild fermentation as their main approach to the fermentation of grapes. I think it's mainly because before that, we don't have a lot of opportunity to travel all around the world. And especially for winemakers who live in Ningxia. But in the year of 2015, 16, 17, 18, they start to travel to different wine regions in the world. They start to realize it's not necessary to use commercial yeast as small-scale wineries. And they start to try, and they have a positive feedback, and then they start to use it in a commercial level. So I think this is a big trend which will happen to most of small-scale winery in Ningxia. They will start to try to use wild fermentation as their main fermentation technique. And other trend, I will not say is trend, but but I try, and other people try as well. So it's a very small trend. You cannot say it's a country-wide level trend. I start to include stand in Marcelin and Shiraz. In Shiraz, it's quite obvious. In Marcelin, it's because I don't taste any green herbaceous character in the stand of Marcelin. It ripens quite well, and it's not like a stand for Cabernet Sauvignon. Maybe more like the stand for Grenache, so the other part of Marcelin. So, which is interesting. It adds another layer to the fruit character of Marcelin. So stand inclusion is interesting. Some people is doing it. Also, 3 years ago, I started to make a pennant, which is, that's because I cannot properly make a traditional method sparkling wine. If I can, I will do it, but it takes a lot of equipment, and all this equipment is kind of expensive and not available in China. So I make a pennant instead of traditional method sparkling. This year, there are 3 producers who is making pennant. I think it's because it sells quite well in the natural wine bar, in the bistros in Shanghai, in Guangzhou. So next year, I can imagine there will be people who try to make pennant because it's so easy to make. It's quicker to sell. It's better for the cash flow. And for orange wine, yep. Also, it's a small trend. Also, it's also started in 5 years ago. I started to make orange wine at 2017 with a little bit with a very small batch, because at that moment in Shanghai, we are actually drink a lot of orange wine and natural wine. So I started to make orange wine in Ningxia, and 5 years later, there are about, I think, 5 producers who is making orange wine. It's also easier to sell because everybody is making this super heavy Cabernet Sauvignon in Ningxia. It's a very intense competition in red wine. But orange wine, right now, only have 5 people making it. So it's less competition. It's easier to sell your wine. And Pinot Noir, yeah. People, I mean, in the consumer side, also in winemaker side, like everybody loves Pinot Noir. So in Ningxia, people are trying to find Pinot Noir vineyard or grow Pinot Noir vineyard and trying to make Pinot Noir. But it's a very Ningxia style Pinot Noir because Ningxia is this dry, hot place. It's so different from Burgundy and so different from all the classic Pinot Noir region all around the world. So it's a very unique style of Pinot Noir.
Well, I think we can almost conclude here for the winemaking. In terms of, I think it's all about people are more exposed to the worldwide wine industry and the trends around the world, right? STEM inclusion, orange wine, pet nat, and all that. And I think the traditional focus on certain styles and certain varieties, they got challenged, not only by the people like you or other younger generation winemakers in China, but also they have to make a change and see what the world is drinking now, right? You can just see the trend. So that's why we also have a limited time. So let's ask the last question I want to ask is about the commercial side, which is also related to the wine trend and winemaking trends, right? So how to achieve commercial success? Let's say for small scale wineries or smaller medium-sized brand in China. I don't want to talk about large scale because for large scale it's another story. It's more about how that company or corporate or the government side, they decide to do something and they invest a lot and they put a brand in. But there are more and more smaller medium-sized wine brands and wineries like yours that are emerging in China nowadays. So how do you actually achieve commercial success? And don't be modest. I think you've already achieved some success, some great success in certain markets. But please comment on how you achieve those kind of success and how what's your plan for the future and how you make it more successful in China and maybe let the world hear about your brands.
So because I come from a sommelier and wine educator background, so I based in Shanghai before, so I have a lot of connections of friends which they are in a key positions to decide the wine list. So in terms of selling the wine in a very small scale, I have a better starting point compared with a lot of my winemaker friends. They actually based in Ningxia, they not travel to Shanghai that often. So I think Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, these first tier cities still the key consumption market within China. So if you So if you want to start a wine business, it's very important you put a lot of attention on this market before you start to make your own wine. Since I decide the key market I want to sell into, I need to decide the style I want to make. I will not have a big success if I make a super China Ningxia tradition style red wine. And I need to make something different because they will have probably already 5 wineries in their list, which is that style. They will have another 20 people lying in the queue to enter the wine list with that style. So I need to make something different, something interesting, something fun. That's why I make orange wine. It's not because I don't want to make traditional style red. I also enjoying a good Bordeaux style wine from Ningxia. When it's good, it's good, very good. But it's just very difficult to sell this wine to the client I may have So that's why I make orange wine, I make peanuts, I make stain inclusion, Marcelin, and Syrah blend. And I think that's probably yet from winemaking from that's a thing which I did very different from almost everybody in China, because in China, if you want to invest on business, people invest on land. So most of the winery, they invest on the vineyard first, and then they invest on the winery. And 4 years later, maybe 5 years later, after they make all these investments, they start to think about, where should I sell my wine? What should my brand be called? How to price my wine? So it's like kind of not in the correct order. So in my opinion, it's better to start a brand first, to sell this wine first, and then you can invest a little bit on vineyard, on winery, if you have enough capital.
Yeah, and I want to add here that it's not those wineries or those people's fault. Is they can own, they could in the past they could only start with the land because the government support the land and they support the grape growing in certain areas like Ningxia, right? And we cannot blame those producers saying, oh, you have to have these kind of established clienteles and market first and then do something. It simply didn't exist back then in China. But now we see more exciting things, projects like what Ian is doing, because the market became more mature and the policies from the government became more mature, and those kind of wine regions got more mature.
Right or wrong, it's because
okay.
China, we are still very traditional. We consider as a consumer, he or she will think, if a winery who don't have its vineyards or its own winery, they see it as a lesser quality wine. So take myself as an example, these days I still make wine other people's winery. I don't have my own winery. It's a super big investment. And I still don't have my land because I need to have a team to manage the same land rather than contract land, have somebody else to manage it. So I don't have my own vineyard. I don't have my own winery. There will be people who post comments on Taobao after they purchase my wine, say, these guys don't have its winery. These guys don't have its own vineyard. It must be a lesser quality wine.
And people would question the authenticity of these products as well.
Exactly. It's not common to make wine in a contract winery and with buying fruits in China. But in Australia, in California, it's so common. People just don't ask any question anymore. But in China, it's a problem. So a winery is probably a 20 million investment at least. So for people who join this business, who have these capitals, of course, they need to consider the feedback from the consumer side. They will invest on the land or in the winery first, and then start their own brand. So yeah, so for me, in the future, as a small scale winery, we don't hire any full-time people. Rather than myself and my wife is doing this these days, we will start to have our first employee this year. And yeah, we don't hire any people. It's very important to maintain a small scale in a very long period of time. It's very important to manage your cost. And we will start to have our first employee. And I think China is very big. We are only exploring a very small part of China. So as a winemaker, you got opportunities to make wine in all regions in China. It's a little bit like some Spanish winemaker. They make wine all around Spain. So China, although it's a little bit big, but the harvest season is a little bit different. Xinjiang starts first, and then Ningxia, and then we have Ningxia is a little bit overlapping with Huailai, and then at the end we have Shangri-La. So it gives winemaker opportunity to make wine all around China. So that's what we are doing right now, to have wine from different part of China, because Chinese consumers, they look for new things all the time. So they don't stick with one wine and drink it for a long period of time. If you still want to have the consumer you have 2 years ago, you better offer something new. So we are making wine in 3 different regions in China. I have distribution network in first tier cities, which is Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, which is kind of not enough. So this year I try to expand the distribution network a little bit. I try to find specific distributors in each second tier or third tier cities. Before, most of the imported wine in China, they have one distributor for entire country. That would be not enough for these days, because the channel is super different and the market is super different, and your customer for your wine is very different. So we need different distributors in different area for different market. Just another very interesting examples. These days, craft beer distributors is looking for some natural wine. So we have 2 small distributors, one in Beijing, one in Wuhan. They are actually mainly focused on distributing craft beer. And yeah, they contact me, say if I can distribute wine. I say, why not? Yes. So they start to distribute my wine into kind of different channel than what we used to know. And for me, also, I will try to export a little bit. So this year we have a little bit going to Hong Kong. I'll try to export a little bit to Japan, to Korea, to Singapore. All this market which we don't make enough than we drink. So it would be interesting, but the main key challenge for me is price. In China, the cost is super high. I'm not able to compete with the wine from Chile, from Australia. Small scale interesting wine from Chile, from Spain, from Italy could be very affordable. But as a producer in China, I'm very difficult to compete with that price point. So for me, it's to raise the quality, to focus on medium price category. Medium quality and price category will be better than an entry level. But the definition here for entry level is not a definition for supermarket. In UK, entry level in China will be retail price around 150 kwai. Right. Yeah, entry level for China, it's retail price for 150 kwai. And the next price category will be around 300 kwai. So to raise the quality, to focus on retail price on around 300 kwai will be my focus in next step.
Wow. Okay. Every time I talk with you, I learn lots of new things. So I certainly hope the audiences will learn a lot. Well, that's not the whole picture of Chinese wine production and market, but I hope we can give everybody some really critical thinking, logical reasoning based on some key facts and these kind of situations in China. It's quite different. It's such a unique place for wine production and for wine market. Okay, so I hope that there's the information is interesting to everyone. So thank you so much, Ian, for having the conversation with me. And I hope people can understand what we are saying. But if you have any questions, we are also, please contact us. If you're interested in Ian's wines, we're not trying to promote the wine brand, but you can find some information online. And what's important is to understand why Ian is doing this, why other small producers are doing that in China, and as compared to those kind of what we call the traditional type of producers versus those kind of huge, big producers in China. There are lots of information we cannot cover today, but I think that's a lot of information already. Thanks again. And thank you for watching this conversation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gus.